Excellent. It looks like we're live. I wanted to take a moment here to welcome everyone to the Virtual Education and Tasting Series, episode 2. We will be starting shortly. My name is Ashley Spilak. I'm with the BC Wine Institute. I am thrilled to introduce our host today, our neighbor arriving digitally from Alberta, Calgary-based WSET Wine Educator and a BC wine lover, Jenny Book. Our event today will last 45 minutes. It will include a 50-minute Q&A session after the tasting. Please share your questions during any time of the webinar, and time permitting, our guests will do their best to answer questions at the end. Technical tasting notes for these featured wines are located on the right-hand side for your download. We encourage you to follow along as we learn more about these exciting wines. And beyond a visit to these BC wineries, and for BC and Alberta viewers looking to find these BC wines in store, we will be posting that information within the chat on the right side of your screen. So that's all from me, and I'll send this over to Jenny Book to introduce our guest BC winemakers today.
Okay, well, great. Thanks, Ashley, and hi, everybody. I'm Jenny Book, and I'm so excited to be here today with winemakers Sarah Bain from Fitzpatrick Family Vineyards and Dwight Sick from Moraine. So hi to you both, guys. For a bit of an intro on both of our winemakers then, Sarah is from New Zealand and has been with the Fitzpatrick Family Vineyards since 2016, right? For those of you that are not familiar with Fitzpatrick, you are missing out. They have an amazing portfolio full of traditional method sparkling wine and great still wines too. The Fitzpatrick family used to own Cedar Creek, but kept Greater Ranch in the sale of Cedar Creek, and so Fitzpatrick Family Vineyards is a project then based on traditional method sparkling wines and really representative of site. Sarah does an amazing job with these wines. We're going to taste the Fitzbrut and the Ehrenfelser, which are two good examples to highlight the freshness of BC wines. We're going to be talking a lot about place and style, and so they're really representative of where they're from. Okay, it also creates a really interesting intersection here because we have wines from that sort of peachland, Summerland zone where Fitzpatrick is located, and then we have wines from Moraine, which are on the Naramata, which are on the east side of the valley. So we also have Dwight Sick from Moraine, who is a long-term BC resident and has a long winemaking history in central Okanagan. He's coming up from Stag's Hollow in the Okanagan Falls to the Naramata as of about 3 years ago. Is that right, Dwight?
Yes, the third vintage.
Yeah, and he's really focused on making wines that speak to the place of Naramata. So Moraine is a project launched by the Aristocrats, who are sorts of family winery essentially, with the intention of making wines from the Naramata, and we're going to see this sense of place and talk about sub-GI in the context of Dwight's Pinot Gris and Meritage. So big thanks to the both of you for coming out today. For all of you tuning in, it's a really great opportunity to pick the brains of a couple of winemakers. So be sure to type any questions, as Ashley said, into the chat bar on the right-hand side there. Okay, we're going to get to those questions in the last 15 minutes. So let's get started and talk about the value of BC wine. So we've all likely considered the question, why is BC wine so expensive? And the simple answer is that BC is an expensive place to make wine, okay? Land, labor, infrastructure, equipment costs are high in BC, and the scale of production is small. So there's no way for the BC wine industry to compete in numbers in that sub $15 category. But making cheap wine does not alone define any region as being good value, right? Good value references the cost to quality ratio, essentially, right? So the question is then, is BC wine good value? And the quality, is it worth the cost, right? Some of you might be familiar with the judgment of the BC tasting, which first launched in 2015. This is an annual competition that the BCWI puts on, and they pit BC wines against international examples according to style categories, right? And the results clearly show that BC wines qualitatively rank very well in the international ring, and from a price point perspective are really evenly pitched against international examples of a similar price range, okay? So the results of the judgment of BC can be found on the BC WI website, and Ashley's going to post a link to the page on the sidebar here, so you'll be able to find it in the right drop-down menu there. These results really put into context the value of BC wines in the international marketplace. But BC wines are not cheap. That's just part of the nature of making quality wine in British Columbia. And stylistically, the wines do not drink like cheap wine. They're better quality than basic value categorized wine. So, right, let's consider France as an example. This is a well-organized classification hierarchy. At the bottom of the pyramid, you see basic vin de table, which is very inexpensive, cheap wine. But they're not excellent quality wines, and nobody expects them to be. To find great wines, you need to climb the hierarchy of classification, which is where we're moving in BC. So a greater focus on the importance of regional GIs, and now the nuance of sub-GI. Okay, so what's a GI? GI stands for Geographic Indication. It's a designation applied to specific geographic boundaries set according to climate, weather, soil, watershed, or other considerations, okay? So you can see on the slide here, these are the defined areas within BC that can produce wine under a specific place name, all right? The Okanagan Valley, which is the most significant in terms of volume of production, has about 84% of plantings, but it's one of 9 regional geographic indications, okay? So actually, we could go back to the previous map just for a quick sec, and you can see in this map, right, where the GIs, yeah, here we go, lie throughout British Columbia, right? But this is still a very broad perspective on geography. So from 2015 onwards, we're seeing the introduction of sub-GIs. And these are smaller geographic designations within the existing regional GIs. And so, yeah, here, stick to this map for a second. So if we stick within the context of the Okanagan Valley, then we can see the Okanagan Valley stretches from the US border to Vernon in the north. And so between that distance, we can see large variations across planting sites. In the north around Lake Country, it's significantly wetter and cooler than in the south around Osoyoos, all right? And so the grape varieties that are suitable in the north are not typically going to be successful in the south. And certainly the styles of wine between those places will not be the same. There's a great deal of variation between soil types throughout the valley. And so there can be distinct differences between sites, even across very small distances, particularly when we think about the east-west delineation of the valley. So sites on the west side of the valley get gentle morning sun and diffuse afternoon sun, or even shade in the late afternoon and evening. And sites on the east side have a western exposure and receive the full intensity of the afternoon sun. So we can see differences in the wines that are produced at different sites throughout the valley. Therefore, it makes logical sense as a position to further promote the value of BC wines to start recognizing and promoting sites with sub-GI designation. And so there's currently 4 officially recognized sub-GIs. You can see them highlighted on the map here. Naramata, Skaha, Okanagan Falls, and the Golden Mile Bench. But in the future, we could expect to see more sub-GIs introduced by the BC Wine Authority, right? Consider the names Black Sage Bench, Kelowna, Lake Country, Peachland or Summerland, and more. All could be options in the future. And hopefully we'll get into some of that discussion on what's to come with future GIs with Sarah and Dwight in the tasting. Okay, so with all of that in mind, let's jump into the wines. If you have the wines, guys, for those of you tuned in, and you haven't already poured yourself, you can crack at it now. We're going to start with the Fitzpatrick Family Fitzbrut. So the Fitzpatrick estate is located between Peachland and Summerland, neither of which are official sub-GIs, but the site is distinct in that it's on the west side of the valley with an eastern exposure. So the site typically sees a longer ripening cycle than those vineyards at the same latitude, but on the other side of the valley. And I think both of these Fitzpatrick wines really show a sense of geography. Let's put it into context and taste. So good. This is a traditional method sparkling wine made from a majority Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, and then a bit of Pinot Blanc and Pinot Meunier. It's aged on the lees for 2 years before release. I have the BC retail price for this wine at about $33 a bottle, which I think is awesome value. This is really great quality wine, in my opinion. It's champagne style, but not champagne prices. It's fresh. I love the fizz, the lovely autolytics which come through. And it really speaks to traditional method wine at an affordable price point. So, Sarah, can you tell us a bit about the Fitz Brut and highlight the importance of Grey Ranch in your ability to make sparkling wine in the Okanagan?
So the site is really important for sparkling. As you emphasised, it's east-facing, so the sun goes behind the hill behind us late afternoon. So we retain some coolness, which is really important for the acidity across the board, but especially for sparkling. And this particular one is 216 Chardonnay dominant, so it's got that bright life acidity to it. But I think what makes it a little bit more rounder is the Pinot Blanc. It's the only season that we've added Pinot Blanc into our brut. And it just gives a bit more richness and complexity to it that I haven't noticed in previous vintages. And then, of course, the Pinot Noir, which is the backbone, the depth and complexity of the wine. And a little bit of Meunier, which is pretty neutral, but adds a little bit of like subtle fruit.
It's super tasty. It's really nice. Yeah, thanks. So Dwight, I understand that you drink a fair amount of sparkling wine. What's your feeling about the Fitz Brut or the potential of sparkling wine in British Columbia in general?
I think overall the potential for high quality sparkling is big in British Columbia. I'm really excited to see the number of producers that are actually taking sparkling as a serious endeavor. And Fitz is probably one of those benchmark producers that has stepped up to the plate and really embraced sparkling wine in a proper manner. Yeah, I mean, what can you say? There's not too many sparklings worldwide that compete at that price point, in my opinion. It's pretty solid stuff.
The price points.
So how much work goes into it? I can attest.
I have a great deal of respect for what you do, Sarah.
Thanks.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, price point is really key for this wine, right? And it's good to point out that you also have other sparkling wines in the portfolio and more premium bottles with longer time on the lees, and they drink fabulously. They're really beautiful, even though the price tag for them is a little bit higher. But as you say, the amount of work that goes into them and the length of time that they have to rest all contributes to those price points, right? They're really solid wines, though. Thanks.
Totally. Thanks.
Awesome. Okay, well, solid bubbles to start us off. Let's move on to the Ehrenfelser then by Fitzpatrick. Ehrenfelser is a really interesting grape. It's German in origin, a crossing of Savannah and Riesling. BC has a long history with Germanic varieties because of their ability to ripen in the short growing season, but not all of them have had commercial success. Ehrenfelser has hung on though. Today it's number 9 in the Okanagan in terms of volume of planting, so it's not a significant player in terms of the volume of production, but it has been said in some wine media that Ehrenfelser might have its greatest success in the Okanagan Valley, so that's a nice tip of the hat. Okay, let's taste. This is so fun for me. It's fresh, it's aromatic, it's lively. It's got these great peachy, pear, floral kind of notes hinting at tropical. It's summer sipping in the glass for me. This retails in BC for $19.50 or thereabouts, right, I think. If you think about the style of this wine in the international marketplace, put against other aromatic grape varieties in that $20 price point, this is awesome value. It's really competitive with similar examples from other places for sure. So, Sarah, can you tell us a bit about this wine and your feelings about Ehrenfelser in the Okanagan?
I'd actually never tasted Ehrenfelser before I arrived. So it was an interesting learning curve. It's so tropical and fruity. Like there's a point in the fermentation when it tastes like pure pineapple juice, which is just crazy. I'm trying to kind of get a style that makes it fruity and easy to drink, but on the drier end, so it still retains some acidity and some backbone. I think because it can be so tropical, I don't want it to turn flabby. This particular one is a bit of a blend. So we've got estate fruit, and then we got some fruit from Middle Bench Road. So I'm not sure if that's exactly Naramata Bench. And a little bit from Oliver. So it's a bit of a blend.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Ehrenfelser can sometimes lose acid, or as I've read, I don't have any winemaking experience with Ehrenfelser, but as I have read, but this is really still bright and fresh and really quite lively on the palate, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really delicious.
I think, especially with our site and the acidity, it just helped really lift that compared to the Oliver fruit that was not so acidic.
Yeah, okay, good. Well, so Dwight, you're not working with any Ehrenfelser, right? But can you speak to the stylistic differences in what you see in the Fitzpatrick sort of portfolio in general versus what you're making? Or is there a case for Peachland, Summerland getting their own designated sub-GI?
I think definitely, given the fact that the acid-driven style, consistent acid-driven style that can be produced from the west side of the valley tells a story in itself. Sarah's done a great job of bringing sort of the fruit of the wine forward and balancing it out with acidity, so the perception is fruit instead of sweetness. And that's a fine line to walk for many winemakers, because the perception can be quickly turned to residual sugar in the wine if the acid's not there. So I think the story for the west side of the valley is definitely driven on the acids, the natural acids that are available for the winemaker to utilize in blending and creating wines.
Yeah, we've got these great slide shots, right, that Ashley's showing. These are the sites on the west side of the valley. You can see that sort of gentle slope giving it the eastern exposure. And there's, you know, particular things here of this sort of mountain that's behind that shades the vineyards in the late afternoon and evening. And so it's really about sites. I mean, these pictures really highlight just how beautiful it all is, right? Yeah. Yeah. Okay, well, awesome. So jumping across the lake then to the east side of the valley with a western exposure atop the white bluffs of the Naramata, we find Moraine, where Dwight produces a portfolio of wines that are really representative of place. The very name of the winery, Moraine, is reference to the terroir and geology of the Naramata and the sites that you work with, Dwight. So can you tell us, in your opinion, why it's important to have the Naramata recognized as a sub-GI?
Yeah, I can actually, because the Naramata Bench is quite unique with its location and proximity to Okanagan Lake. The moderation of the temperatures throughout the growing season, both the winter and the summer, are greatly influenced by the lake positioning. The soil profiles are quite unique in that there's a division line throughout the Naramata Bench running the length of it. And the closer you get to the lake, the more marine sediments that are influenced on the growing sites relative to the upper portion of the Naramata Bench that have some bonier soils and decomposing granites. So you can almost see in this picture, if you look above the road, you can see the granite that's throughout that area of the upper portion of the Naramata Bench. And as you cross over the road, that's sort of the division point getting into our vineyards at the upper end of the vineyard near the road, where we have this combination of decomposing granites and the sedimentary layers from the lake settling. As we get further down, it's pure, what we refer to as moon dust. It's just pure sediment layers that are very mineral driven. Creates a very unique growing environment, a very challenging viticultural site, but the diversity and complexity of the wines that come off of it are pretty impressive.
Yeah, cool. I think that those sub-GIs are such an important element in promoting the idea of BC wines as quality terroir-driven wines, right? I mean, to me, this is the next necessary step in promoting the value of BC wines, particularly, well, in any context, but really important in an international context too, a greater focus on place and the importance of site in driving different styles of wine, because it's true that the wines in Naramata they're different from the wines from other places throughout the valley, right? So I think this is the conversation we need to start having, yeah?
I agree, yeah, definitely.
Okay, well, let's taste the Pinot Gris.
Becoming far more influenced by where their wines come from.
Yeah. Okay, so Pinot Gris is the #1 white in the Okanagan Valley, and for good reason, obviously. It's so tasty, and it does so well. This is a lovely, subtle complexity for me. These great appley, pear kind of notes, and there's some super interesting sort of sweetgrass and dried hay components. It's really bright and fresh, which is such the takeaway message about most BC wines, I feel, but this is no exception. And it's dry, right? Sometimes Pinot Gris can be bottled with noticeable residual sugar, but this is dry with, I think it was 2 grams per liter residual sugar in the tech sheet. You guys have that. And the acid is really lively, right? Bright and fresh. It's so versatile from a food and wine pairing perspective. And at $22 a bottle, pretty great. You could open this on any day of the week, really, as it goes, right? Dwight, can you talk us through this Gris and highlight the site and what drives this style of wine from Moraine then?
Really, again, it's acid driven. The lower portion of the photo on the right-hand side is our Pinot Gris block. It's a distinct block in that the flavor profile always leans in exactly your description there. That Asian apple pear, leaning into sort of dry straw elements on the nose. Yes, it's bone dry, and that may be stylistically my departure from many other Pinot Gris in the valley that I find lean a little closer to the patio sipper style. I wanted it to be a serious wine that would be part of the meal and more food driven. I think it's a great representation of the mid-valley style of Pinot Gris. Further south, they just don't have the acidity, and further north, I don't think they get the ripening profile. So the Naramata bench is ideal for Pinot Gris. It's kind of the Goldilocks of the Okanagan Valley.
Cool, that's neat to think about, right? From a Gris perspective, that's good. Thanks, Dwight. Well, Sarah, you don't work with any Pinot Gris, but you do, or I think you don't work with any Pinot Gris, right? No, but you do work with Pinot Blanc and Pinot Noir, right? So what are your feelings on the suitability or the potential of Pinot family grapes in general throughout the Okanagan?
This is a great example. I love that you've kept the acidity there, and the minerality really shines through. I think you've definitely got a good spot for quality Pinot Gris. Maybe down south it would become too fruity and it would lose the sharpness and the brightness that you've managed to gain here.
Yeah, it's really tasty.
We actually have a Central Otago Pinot Gris.
Ah, yeah, interesting. Okay, cool, guys. So, all right, let's swing into the last of the 4 wines then. This is the Moraine Meritage. Let's taste. Okay, so this is a blend of Merlot, Cabernet Franc, and Malbec. I get these beautiful sort of juicy raspberry, black plum notes. Love this chocolate covered cherry kind of element in here, and some mocha from the oak. And the thing that I really like about this wine is that it's quite full bodied and it's got some nice heat from the alcohol, but it's still really light on its feet because of this great acidity, right? The retail price is $30 a bottle, BC pricing, which is really well positioned. It's highlighting the value of BC wines, even across diverse style categories, right? So Dwight, I noticed that Cabernet Sauvignon is not included in the blend. Can you speak to the choice of grapes that you've used in the wine relative to your sites in the Naramata?
Yeah, I mean, Cabernet Sauvignon is one of those grapes in the Okanagan Valley that probably 2 in 10 years is successful for many growers. There are exceptions to the rule further south in the valley that just have that specific site that excels for Cabernet Sauvignon. But overall, it is a difficult grape to consistently hit the ball out of the park. So I wanted to make sure we were producing meritage that was representative of the grapes that are successful year after year on the Naramata bench. The two grapes I think that will continually succeed will be Merlot and Cab Franc. I still say of those two, the leading player in that dance should probably be Merlot. And Merlot can be done consistently well if it's grown in the right sites. So that really defined the order for blending so that we could produce meritage that would be consistent in vintage to vintage as far as the quality levels of the wine.
Yeah, it's really nice. I mean, I love Merlot and I also love Franc and I really like Malbec too. And you put them together, this is such a successful blend. Yeah, really, really lovely. But Sarah, you make a meritage also, right? But you're not using estate fruit. You're sourcing grapes from throughout the valley. Can you talk about your grape and site selection process in terms of, sourcing from different sites means to you and assembling the wine?
So we source our meritage is Merlot, Cab Franc, Cab Sav. We source from one site down by Osoyoos. Really good viticulture, good site. It's quite different to this one. This is really supple, elegant, rich, whereas the Cab Sav and ours really adds that tannin, which I find maybe it's site specific, but it takes a while to really blend in and mellow out and become really drinkable.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I'm surprised actually that it's such an elegant wine for Naramata bench, but I think I need to do more research on my GIs.
Hey, this leads into the next round, which will be just a lineup of, similar, we'll do all meritage from different subregions within the Okanagan. That's like a great round too, right?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. Okay, well, everybody, that wraps up the tasting portion here. We're going to open it up to questions. So again, if you have any questions and you haven't typed them in yet or discussion points, just type it into the chat bar on the right-hand side of the screen. And I'm going to try to navigate any questions that have already come through. So hold tight, everybody. Okay, so I see in here where Ashley's posted some information, right? So if you're looking for the judgment results, they're in there. Okay. Okay, some great comments. So Tanya says that while she worked at Cedar Creek for the Fitzpatrick family, they always said that it was like drinking fruit salad in a glass. I bet you're talking about Aaron Felser. Okay, so Elaine has a question. Where does the pineapple come from? I had pineapple sparkling wine in Maui. Have you ever tried it? And this is maybe Sarah, I pitched to you. We're talking, pineapple and Aaron Felser, right?
I don't know. I just think it's one of those tropical notes that really comes through in Aaron Felser. My history in making Aaron Felser is pretty short. It's 3 years, so I'm definitely no expert on it. I just think it's the leading predominant tropical note. It does come and go, though. Like it can be stone fruit one day and more pineapple the next, so it's fluid.
Cool. Okay, so there's a question here for Dwight from Leslie. I couldn't get the 2017 meritage, but instead went with the 2014 because I know actually we have some older vintages on market, which is awesome. How would you describe the 2014 vintage and how does it compare to the 2017?
I recently had the 2014. I think that the oak profile was a little more dominant in the 214. There was a little more Cab Franc in the equation as well. I think that obviously the 2017 showing a little more primary fruit. The 2014 at this stage is starting to show a little more tertiary, a little more dried fruit elements, a little more fig. it definitely, I think, is a good looking glass to see where the 217 will potentially evolve to stylistically with some bottle age.
That's cool. It's great to have an opportunity to taste previous vintages too, right? That's a gift.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, another question for Dwight there. Where do you source your Malbec from? That's from Tanya.
It's all state grown. It's off the Anastasia Vineyard in that photo that you saw earlier of the overhead shot. All the Merlot, Cab Franc, and Malbec are all off that site.
Cool. Okay, question from Sheila. Are these wines available in Ontario? We have some folks from a few miles east of here. I can't actually speak to that. Do you guys know? Do you have agent representation? Are they in LCBO vintages ever?
The Meritage and Pinot Gris are not, but I know we do have representation in Ontario, and the Cliffhanger Red, which is a Meritage red blend. The Riesling, I believe as well, is in Ontario. But at the moment, that's the two listings I believe we have there.
Well, what about you, Sarah? Do you know?
I don't actually know. I can't speak to that.
Yeah.
I don't think we're represented there, but I think we ship there if you were to buy online.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry, it's not a definitive answer. Stay tuned. Okay, so we have a question from Clyde. How does geology and climate vary as you move up the valley? Okay, well, I can pitch a little bit to this, and Sarah and Dwight, you can add. But from a climate perspective, Soyuz is significantly warmer and drier than what we see in lake country in the north. So we consider sort of a Soyuz and lake country as the two extremes, neither of which are official sub-GIs, but there's a case for making either of them one in the future, right? From a geology perspective, the Okanagan was carved by this period of glaciation. So the glaciers stopped at Okanagan Falls. So everything north of Okanagan Falls is carved landscape, and everything south of Okanagan Falls is sort of glacial till outwash, right? Can either of you speak to sort of how that impacts wine style? Sarah, Dwight, you want to pitch in?
Obviously, soil influences a great deal. I think that there's also some other missing factors in there that have to do with the width of the valley and weather influence. So if we have a look at actually, say, the Okanagan Falls area, to the south, McIntyre Bluff creates one of the narrowest crossings in the valley, and to the north of Okanagan Falls, Peach Cliff creates the second narrowest point. So they end up with this pocket of hot air that sits within this bowl that is unique to the valley. As we get further north and onto the Naramata Bench, again, the lake influences and the afternoon winds create a totally different growing environment. The winds allow us, obviously, to keep the vineyard somewhat cooler and moderated from the late afternoon heat. So varieties like Cab Franc, which typically don't like to be beyond about 28 degrees, actually keep growing and photosynthesis continues. Further south, if it gets too hot for Cab Franc, they shut down. So there's a huge variety of different growing areas within each microclimate that really make this a complex valley.
It's a big topic of discussion, really. It's hard to hammer out in a couple of seconds. Do you have anything to add to that, Sarah?
Not really. I think he said a pretty educated statement there. I mean, I'm still learning the area and the weather patterns. It's completely different from New Zealand, which is, much more maritime. Yeah. Dwight, you're the expert on this one.
Yeah, it's a question for next session, right? The in-depth geology and influence on the wines, right? Okay, so look, Debbie has a question here. How many years can the whites be cellared? So maybe we can work through this sort of systematically. What about the Fitz Brut, Sarah? How long would you cellar it for?
This particular one, I would say 5 to 10, easy. On a more, I find a more acidic year, like say the 12 or the 17, I think will sell it better, just has more backbone to stand up to it. But I think this will easily do 10 years. The Ehrenfelser, I would say, is an early drinker, you know, within 5 years. In saying that, I haven't tasted a 5-year-old one of ours, so I'll let you know.
Can surprise you, right? Dwight, what about the Gris? How long would you sell the Gris for?
Overall, I think Pinot Gris is pretty much an early to mid-term consumption wine. 3 to 5 years max. I would not tend to want to leave it beyond that. I don't think you're going to gain anything by doing so.
Okay. We have there's some fighting words in here. Alan's looking to open the can. He says, Fitzpatrick and Moraine both create fantastic wines, which I have enjoyed many times. The question is, if you were to recommend one other winery in the Okanagan that you think is making equally amazing wines, what would it be and which varietal?
Oh, that's...
For me, the varietal would be Pinot Noir. And I would say producer-wise, Roche is doing some pretty cool things on the Naramata bench.
Awesome.
Yeah, I agree with that. I would say Riesling from East Kelowna.
Right.
Fun. Yeah, don't go out there with the winery. It's safer that way. Okay, so we have a question from Sid. Can we report on the early status of the 2019 vintage for the red grapes?
Yes. Well, for us, it was pretty interesting. We got our Pinot Noir in relatively early. We had a challenging season here on site. And for our Soyuz Reds, we had to pull them in early because the valley got frosted. So the canopy dropped off and they're essentially stopped ripening. I'm surprised at how well they came in. They're tasting pretty good. You know, they're not going to be big, full, rich, you know, mature examples, but I think they'll be just softer, more elegant.
Yeah, our Pinot came in relatively early as well. We had all hands on deck in the vineyard, and so we vineyard sorted prior to even picking. So anything that came into the cellar was healthy, and yields were down substantially. But the overall quality of the Pinot is good to very good, I would term it as. The Bordeaux varietals, we got off really lucky in the frost event that happened during the Thanksgiving weekend, and we actually dodged the bullet, and we had held full leaves until the end of October.
Really? Lucky you.
Yeah, we were one of the few on the bench.
Yeah.
Airflow, luck of the draw. I don't know what the explanation is, but we managed to hang our reds substantially longer than many other sites. That being said, I think the reds are going to be really good.
Yeah, good, interesting. Thanks, guys. Okay, so Julie has a question. Is the webinar going to be posted? And so, yes, Ashley, maybe you can speak to this. I believe it's going to be posted. Do you have them up on the BCWI events site? Where do you have them posted? Or do you?
Yes, we do. Actually, this whole webinar will be emailed to you a few hours after the completion today. So you'll get an email where you can actually rewatch it. Along with all the tasting notes and the presentation, along with those beautiful photos. And it'll also be posted on our Taste and Terroir blog at winebc.com.
Awesome. Great. Thanks, Ashley. Kay Fairley has a question. Where can I find out more about BC wines, GIs, and sub-GIs? So good question, because it's a pretty complex topic to sort of talk, in a half an hour amongst wines. The BCWI does ambassador programs. Maybe Ashley can speak to where those programs are hosted posted. I know we run them in Calgary and Vancouver and likely other cities as well. And Find Vintage hosts they hold Canadian wine specialist courses where we talk in depth about programming too. So Ashley, what about the ambassador programs? Where are they held? Is information like that on the BCWI website?
We've actually just gone through a full process of refreshing all our materials. So right now, this is part and parcel. We're kind of teasing out a few elements of our Ambassador 1, and then the Ambassador 2 and 3 are to come as well. So I just say stay tuned. We don't have any official dates yet. We're obviously working with extraordinary circumstances right now, but we'll be getting those materials out to you. If we can't meet you in person, we'll get them to you digitally in some capacity. So just stay tuned and make sure you sign up for our newsletters.
Yeah, cool. Okay, good. So Alita is asking, in Calgary, where can we find these wines? It's not showing up on Liquor Connect. Well, not showing up on Liquor Connect is interesting. I know that Moraine has just started with Delph, right? So they're most definitely available in Calgary, as are Fitzpatrick. I'm not entirely sure about specific retail locations, but Ashley sort of mentioned that there are resources for that. They should both be on Liquor Connect, I feel. Look, guys, there's links in this chat bar at the very bottom, Alita, that you will be able to find some further information in terms of where these wines are available. Sarah, do you know what your agency is that you deal with in Alberta? No, I don't have it offhand. Okay, we will figure that out and we will get it posted to you. I'll contact you, Alita. All right. We can't hear you, Ashley. Turn that mic back on.
Sorry, I always mute myself. So Fitzpatrick did communicate to us that Beyond Wine and Beyond and liquor depots in both Calgary and Edmonton carry their wines. And if you do check the links, I've hyperlinked where those locations actually are in Calgary and Edmonton, and same for the Moraine wines right now that are available in Alberta. If you connect to those links, and you'll be able to see exactly where those wines are located. And keep refreshing, because as you know, these are new vintages, so new products coming to market all the time. And so expect a lot of these amazing wines, especially if you enjoy them, will be in store shortly.
Awesome. And it looks like there's lots of positive comments and sort of chit chat in the sidebar here. I don't see any other specific questions for the winemakers. Yeah, if I've missed anything, guys, type it in now.
I think we're good.
Awesome.
Excellent. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Jenny, you're fantastic. So educated. You got a lot out in just a half hour. And winemakers, thank you for joining us and giving a little bit of a touch of the Naramata bench from our seats at home. And, of course, the beautiful Greta Ranch property as well. We appreciate your time. We know you guys are screaming busy. And, yeah, join us for episode 3 coming soon on June 10th. There will be more information coming your way. We'll have Sharon McLean leading that one. Thanks, everyone, for joining us, and have a very safe and enjoy your BC wines.